top line sales. So today we're going to dig into his background and figure out how you can take some of what he has done and apply it to your life. I'm thrilled to welcome Shaahin. Shaahin, thanks for taking the time out.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Of course. So you in the world of e-commerce, a lot of people know who you are, Shaahin. You've been on the Adam Carolla podcast. If people go to your website, you've been featured on every regular traditional news outlet from Chicago Tribune to everywhere. So, but if people are not familiar with who you are, can you take a minute to give the audience a little bit of background of who you are, and then we'll get into what you've done and how you did it.
Sure, yeah, amazing. So I started my first company when I was 15 years old, left home at a very young age, got involved in the electronic music scene, the rave scene, the dance culture at that time. And somehow, by hook or by crook, I managed to create a revolutionary pill that became the rave natural drug of choice. It was completely legal. I got it through a very unusual system of distribution, and I used lessons that I had learned from a mentor in sales and influence to grow the company from negative, from literally nothing, me sleeping on the beach and in abandoned buildings, to over $1 billion in revenue. And it's funny because I tell the story of to demonstrate how naive I was in those days. I was a teenager and I went into my office. This was months before. I was literally sleeping on the beach, sleeping in abandoned houses and whatnot. And a few months later, I had 200 employees and I was in my office in Venice Beach. And I remember walking into my office, and my secretary at the time, we had secretaries back in the 90s still. She broke the news to me that CNN wanted to have me on. Sam Donaldson of Nightline was on his way, and we had broken over $1 billion in revenue, pre-internet, pre-social media, pre-Facebook. And in that moment, I had this aha kind of holy smokes thought that, holy crap, I don't know how much $1 billion is. We've made $1 billion, but I have no idea how much $1 billion is. And I had a moment of panic, and then everybody reassured me, look, they're not going to ask you that. You'll have time to look it up before. They just want this long hair kid who is really making a huge impact in the culture at the time. And from there on out, it was a wild ride of growing this company past, even the $1 billion mark in those days.
It's interesting, when people think of starting a business, they think of, the product first in a lot of ways and the market second. And, sometimes, having an idea, having a product that may have a product market fit, right, or may not, right, but having enough naivete to say, okay, this is good, let me start this, is in a lot of ways magic. Because I think today, knowing what you know now, if you go back to your 15-year-old self and you know all the regulatory hurdles, all the challenges of building a large company, you probably would have said, I can't do it. I have no idea where to start, right? But you were dumb enough in the beginning to just go, look, I believe, right? And then you go out and do it. And so talk a little bit about that, because that in a lot of ways gets in the way for a lot of people. They have this idea, whether it's a product or a service. They don't exactly know how to scale it. And then they get some coaching, they watch, they learn a few things, and they realize, holy crap, there's a lot of pieces involved in this. And it shuts them down. They're like, okay, too much, too hard. So,
yeah,
there's some magic in being naive.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I tell people this often, that when you're young, you have something, even though you think you have nothing, you have something that other people might not. Now I am in my 40s. I'm 46. I've got a kid. I own real estate. I'm at a place in my life where I'm very comfortable. And while I do have the wisdom that comes with being the ripe old age of 46, I no longer have that hunger that I had when I'm in my 20s. My life is pretty good. I've traveled all over the world, private yachts, private planes, houses all over the place. I've done all that stuff, and I've become accustomed to a certain level of life. And so the risks that I take at this stage in my life are far more calculated. when I was young and I started Herbal Ecstasy, which was the name of the product in those days, I was not knowledgeable about the fact that I could fail. It completely didn't occur to me that not only could I fail, but that the stuff that I was doing was highly improbable that it would succeed. But you know what? I was relentless and I had grit and I had hunger. And I remember going out there actually to make sales when I would be going virtually door to door. You know, the way I started distributing Herbal Ecstasy was I basically made it I had a girlfriend at the time. I made it in her kitchen and like literally making these pills in the bathtub. And I walked up to the drug dealers. The supply of drugs had dried up. Because at that time everybody was taking this drug called ecstasy, Molly, MDMA. It was a big popular drug in the 90s. I don't know if people still do it. And the supply had dried out because it was a very complex drug to manufacture and there weren't that many people who knew how to do it. And the drug dealers were very unhappy because the supply of their main product had dried up. So I would walk into the clubs and walk up to the drug dealers and be like, dude, I got something for you. I know this is going to sound crazy. It's not illegal. You'll be able to sell it. You'll still be a drug dealer. You'll just be a legal one. And I went from one guy to two guys to 10 guys. But the story that I'm telling here is an interesting one. And that's that I would not eat until I made the sale. Until I walked in and walked out with $10,000 cash, which was my minimum in those days. If I'm going to walk up to somebody and sell them some pills, I'm going to walk out with $10,000 cash. I would not eat until I made a sale. I would go in hungry, literally hungry. And even though in those days, once the company got going a little bit, I had plenty of money to eat and do all those things that I wanted to do. That was not the case before. I did have a period of time where I was eating hot dog buns with relish because you could get them at the hot dog stands for free. And I was living off that stuff. I was eating relish, ketchup, whatever the condiments because they're free. And it was fine. But when I started doing these sales, I would keep myself literally hungry. And then when I got salespeople working under me, I tried that. Did not work so well with the salespeople. And I learned that very quickly that you do need to feed your salespeople before you send them out into the battlefield. It's a very unique quality and trait to be disciplined. And I wonder, it would be interesting to see what that would look like in your business in real estate. And I'm a big student of real estate, particularly cash flow positive real estate. I teach it to my students. I encourage everybody to make that one area of the foundation. I mean, you know, as a real estate agent, that obviously one of the big drivers of wealth in this country is the real estate ladder and people climbing the real estate ladder. So it would be interesting to see what it would be like if agents and brokers did not get to go home and eat until they made a sale.
Well, yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit because I think, you know, having enough grit. I mean, I think most people, most entrepreneurs, right? Forget real estate agents. This is just entrepreneurs, right? The thing that you got to, right? Private yachts and airplanes and houses all over the place. This is the vision that people have, right? The steps to achieving that vision and the pain necessary and the grit, as you said, necessary to achieve that vision is the thing that most people lack, right? They just don't have that. And I'm curious for you, you know, your grit, your drive, you know, is that something that was innate with you from early on, or like, did you? This is a better question, Shaahin. When you were 15 and you had this aha moment for this completely legal drug that might replace ecstasy, right? What was your vision? Was it, you know, because having a minimum of 10 grand at 15, like 15, when you're 15, 10 grand is a boatload of money. How do you not just take the 10 grand, right? And then go to a bunch of raves in Europe, right? Like, and just live that lifestyle, right? What was in you that said, okay, right, I'm going to take the 10 grand and I'm not going to consume it, but I'm going to reinvest it?
That's a really great, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was it. Yeah, you were gonna go.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'll tell you, it's interesting. You know, I've got a book coming out, not to plug it too much, but it's called Billion: How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult, and it talks about my journey into starting at nothing, leaving home at 15, being an Iranian immigrant, and turning the company into this billion-dollar supplement company in the 90s. And you know, the interesting part about what you're saying is that you have to realize that I came from Iran, the third world. I was a scrappy kid. 5 years old, I would leave home. We would just leave out the front door. Iran, by the way, one of the safest places in the world, especially for kids. Most people don't think that. You think of war and bombs and stuff like that. It's not like that at all. It is super safe. Kids can walk the streets, something that we can't do now in a neighborhood where homes are going for $4 or $5 million now in California's West Side. In Iran, it's fine. It's perfectly fine for kids to go out. So 5 years old, you start having your gang. You go out with your buddies, you hang out, and you come home in time for dinner. You go to grandma's house, cousin's house, who knows? You're at someone's house, and you always end up, strolling home at some stage. So I came from that. I came from this culture that was very loving, very generous, but also very scrappy. You didn't have people who would tell you, hey, somebody, I wouldn't come running home to mommy saying somebody punched me. If I did that, everybody would be like, what? What'd you do? Like, you didn't punch him back? So we migrated to the United States in the 1980s, 1979, actually. The fall of the Shah, the Iranian Revolution. Turns out that Americans didn't love Iranians as much as we loved ourselves. And also turns out that being an Iranian kid who didn't speak English during Iran-Contra in an affluent West Side community, while we were poor and didn't have any money, also didn't buy a lot of friends. So I had a chip on my shoulder. I would get the shit kicked out of me every day in school. And I would look around me. My parents managed to buy a house in a neighborhood that was up and coming at that time. And it's a funny story because, there was a Hare Krishna community living in this property. And it was the only property my folks could afford. And the agent told them, hey, the owners will let you have this property for cheap, like half of the market value, but we can't evict these people. Like one of the guys, his uncle is a cop in the force, and they've been trying to evict them forever. They can't leave. They're literally camping in the acre of backyard that you have. You got to deal with them. And over time, I saw my folks, bringing them tea, bringing them food. Everybody had tried to kick them out, doing all kinds of things. Some dude brought an exterminated. All kinds of these people wouldn't move. And my parents, just with kindness over time, just brought them food, just were nothing but kind to them. And one day the guy came up to my dad and was like, hey, man, you guys aren't like these other people that have been, messing with us. What can we do for you? My dad said, look, we're starting our family here. We moved from Iran. We don't have a lot of money. We really need this, the house for our family. So it'd be great if you guys could eventually move along. And they did. And it was a miracle. They did. And my parents, cleaned up the house, and the area became super affluent. But my parents, they killed them with kindness, so to speak. And as this area became affluent, we were still poor. My dad worked at a dry cleaners. He worked at a pizza shop, and then he managed to get a little dry cleaners. And I saw this wealth around me. I saw wealthy people. And I remember, it's funny, I tell the story. I went over to a friend's house whose dad was a famous doctor, and he did surgeries for Michael Jackson and all these people. And I remember my buddy being like, I'd be like, okay, so when is your mom coming home to cook for us? Because you invited me for dinner. And he goes, oh, buddy, they're gone. They're out. I'm like, well, how do you eat? He's like, well, here, just pick what you want. I'm like, whoa. What is this? He's like, it's a menu. And I was like, so I can get a hamburger and a pizza, and they'll bring me both of those things. And he's like, yeah, but just get whatever you want. My dad gave me his credit card. I was like, whoa, what is that? And he's like, you give it to them, and they give you what you want. And I was shocked. That was the level that I was living at. And I was, staying over at people's houses and looking at the stuff that they were doing. And I was like, man, I want that, Dad. So I went to my parents and I was like, how do you get that? I want that. And my parents are like, well, son, you have to become a doctor. And when you become a doctor, you will get a house and a wife and kids and Mercedes. Life is good. And I said, okay, well, great. I want to do that. How long does that take? Well, that's the big, wah, wah, wah. So you got to go to school for 8 years. It's more like 12 years. You got to get into debt for, $250,000. Then maybe you'll get credit to get your starter house. Then after, 20 years, you're fat and bald. You got no energy. You've been working all day. You got a car that's owned by the bank. You got a house that's owned by the bank. Probably the wife and the kids are owned by the bank. And you're miserable every day waking up because you have no time, no freedom. And I was like, I saw that early on. I had the foresight. I was like, hell no. So what's the alternative? I went out and I found books, and I fell in love with the old-timey self-help books. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember Og Mandino and Napoleon Hill, who wrote
Yeah,
Think
of course.
And I started reading these old-timey guys, and I remember I would get the tapes, the cassettes. Cassettes had come out, and I would get the cassettes of their voice recordings, and these guys would be like, no matter what a man can think of, he can achieve those things in time. And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. Why is nobody talking about this? I was like, I want to be like these guys. I want to be like Andrew Carnegie. I want to be super rich. But then I looked and I was like, man, the path for me to that isn't looking very good if I stay here. So I bailed. I was thinking to myself, you know, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'll keep getting what I've got. This is not a path to getting wealthy quick. I want to be rich. I want to do it quick, and I want to make an impact. And I'm ready to, like you were saying earlier, I'm ready to burn my ships. And that's what I did at 15 years old. By the time I got to 15, I was like, see y'all later. No friends, no family, nothing. I took off. And all I had was my books. And I remember Think and Grow Rich. I remember the pages of the book I had highlighted so many times that you could barely read the words because I had read the pages so many times. And I had them taped to the back, to the trunk of it was like a 65 Lincoln Continental. And I was sleeping in the trunk, because very spacious trunks in those days. And I would sleep in the back of the car. I'd shine my flashlight and I would read my favorite pages off the back of the trunk of the car every single night. And when I would wake up, I would go about hustling. I would try to figure out how to make money until I started this company. So I think that kind of gives you a picture of what brings about that kind of grit.
So yeah, right. So well, that's interesting, right? So that kind of grit. So you were a little bit scrappy anyway in the beginning, but that kind of grit was augmented by, you know, Napoleon Hill, right? Napoleon Hill is, you know, figure out what you want, get very clear, create a white hot heated desire around that, and that's all you focus on, right? So it sounds to me like you were following that path. Now the deal is, right, I think from your story, you also realize that the path, the typical path of getting to this thing, right? The way that your friends were living, and your dad says, okay, well, it's 12 years and you're in debt, and then maybe, and you wanted a shortcut, right? You knew what you wanted. You said, okay, I want to shortcut the process. I'm not going to go to school for 12 years. I'm not going to get in debt for this. I want it all, and I want it right now. But, and that's what everybody wants, Shaahin, right? Everybody wants that. The problem is there's no clear path, right? Nobody's written a step-by-step book and gone, okay, this is how you go from 0 to 10 million in X amount of time. That doesn't exist, right? So people like you are rare, right? And you're rare because, for a lot of reasons, right? Maybe it was just you stumbled on product market fit early on, but you have to have that foundation. You have to have that white hot heated desire, and you have to have something internal to say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to push through every barrier that I meet. So how do you, Shaahin, you were clear on what you wanted. You wanted to be rich. Was there any more clarity? Like, for just a few minutes, was there any more clarity that you had other than I just want to be rich?
Yeah, I wanted fast cars, hot girls, expensive travel.
Sure,
I mean,
right.
You know, I wanted all that stuff that I could never have back when
But now we're talking a little bit about mindset, because, you know, the scrappy immigrant story is, you know, follow all the rules and you know, integrate into this culture and do it the way the people do it. But again, you seem to reject that notion, right? You were saying, no, I'm going to shortcut the system. So did you just stumble on this opportunity? And again, that's fine if you did, but I want to get into how you didn't destroy yourself along the path, along the process.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities to destroy myself. So first off, I credit the majority of that to a number of factors. And, you know, again, I write about it in my book, Billion. I'll send you a copy so you can check that out too. We could talk about it later if you want as well. But for the purpose of this podcast, what I will tell you is that what I did was unique. Why? Okay. Because I was young and we talked about this effect of not having anything to lose, the effect of burning your ships and not having anything to come back to. So when you go out there, you either sink or swim. For me, that was an essential mood. Also, what I did was I was at the right place at the right time. Remember what I told you, that the supply of this stuff had dried up and I created an alternative just at the right time. I was at the right place. The dance music scene was taken up. So I was at the right place at the right time. I built a network being the most essential thing. There's a guy, Barabosi, who's wrote this book called Success Formula. It's a great book for any of your listeners if they want to check it out, especially if you're an A, absolutely check out this book. And he talks about why some people are successful and other people are not. And it's not what you think, because we think, okay, well, someone's successful because they are high performers. How many shitty movies have you seen at a movie theater who've made money and you're like, I want my fucking 2 hours back because that shit was so bad? How many times have you gone to a gallery, and I see you've got some cool art in the background, but how many times have you gone into a gallery and you've seen the kids' art is the best. I have it on my wall too. I love that stuff. But you go into a gallery and you see some absolutely shit art, sometimes literally, and it's going for millions of dollars. But then another guy who's highly qualified, whose art is far better, whose films are far better, doesn't make any money or very little in comparison. We look at someone like Basquiat, Jean-Michel Basquiat, one of the great artists of our time, fantastic. Art historians all agree that his skill level, what we call his proficiency at doing art, was maybe not as high as some other people during that time that were trained, that had better color theory and all this stuff. His work goes for 50 million. I think one of them just sold for close to 100 million. And other artists in that time that had all those elements, their art, you can buy it for 10 grand, 5 grand. Why? So Barabosi in Success Formula breaks it down to two things. And I equate my success to that too. One is performance. So you've got to be competent and be able to perform. But outside of performance, there is one element that trumps all others. Can you guess what it is?
Well, I think it's distribution. You can have the best product. I don't want to derail you, but I think you can have the best product. You can have the best hamburger in the world, but if nobody knows about it, or only the people in your neighborhood know about it, your ability to grow is going to be limited to that subset, right? The people who know about it. Same thing with art. You can have So I think distribution.
That's a great guess. And I talk about distribution in my book a lot, and I talk about it to my students. I think you always start with distribution first, but the answer is network. Building a network. For example, if you and me were going to launch a cryptocurrency, and we said, and by the way, I'm not into cryptocurrencies, but if you and me were going to launch a cryptocurrency, and we went out there today and we said, hey, bud, we're going to launch a cryptocurrency. It's going to be called Super Agent Coin. And we launch it. Sure, I might have a good network. You might have a good network. We may do okay. We may not. Chances are it'll probably be the same as most of the other cryptocurrency launches. Now, if you get Elon Musk to launch the exact same cryptocurrency, even if it's not publicized, if it's Elon Musk, just because of the network that he has, if it was someone like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, you'd just know that cryptocurrency would be successful. Why? Because of their network, because people want to get involved in it. And Basquiat, similarly, had a very intricate network. How did he get that network? He hustled. He went door to door and he walked up to Andy Warhol and said, buy my art. And he'd show up the next day and said, buy my art, until Warhol was like, fuck, man, this kid is relentless. Bring him into my studio and let's see what we could do with him. Same with Bezos. Bezos worked for D.H. Hutton, one of the biggest, Jeff Bezos, we're talking about the founder of Amazon, one of the biggest venture firms, bringing very inexpensive money, cheap money from Wall Street and putting it into the Silicon Valley companies. And that's why Bezos was so successful, more than I think any other reason, because he was one of the smartest guys in the room and he came from a very established network. And then you look at people like Steve Jobs. He worked for, I should say, my friend Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari. And all that network that was going at the time with Hewlett Packard. And so for me, part of my success is contributed to networking. And At that time, I made sure that I built a very powerful network. Now, I did have competency, I did have proficiency in what I did building those pills, and that came from just stick-to-itiveness. But I teach this. It's funny, now I teach people how to make recurring revenue on the Amazon stream, selling on the Amazon platform. And one of the things that I teach my students is, and we're pretty selective about who we let into our mastermind, our group, and our course. But I know when people come in, the ones that play it like it's a roulette table are the ones that aren't going to make it. The ones that are like, all right, I'm going to put my chips on this number, 35, 36, and 12, and they just wait to see if it hits. And if it doesn't, they're like, yeah, maybe this wasn't meant for me. Maybe this just isn't my thing. And they move on to doing something else. We don't get many of those because we ferret them out ahead of time. The ones that succeed, the ones that I know are going to succeed, don't come at it with that mindset. The mindset they come at it with is, I'm going to drive this nail through this piece of wood. I don't care if it's going to take a hammer, if it takes a rock, a sledgehammer. If I have to nuke that nail into that piece of wood, I am going to do it because that's what I've come here to do. And then what they do is they'll launch a product. They may succeed, they may fail. Usually it's somewhere in the middle where they'll have some success, some failure with it, and they'll tweak it, they'll change it, they'll adjust. And it's those micro adjustments in any business. It's being able to get into the minutia, those details, and perfect those details that makes you a master. I'm a master now at selling on Amazon, not because I've never failed, but because when I fail, I learn from those failures and modify my algorithms to the point where I have as near perfection as I can get. And I'm constantly learning and constantly changing. And in those days, it was the same kind of thing, but more analog.
Right. And I think it's always the same kind of thing, right? You have to learn and adjust as you go on, right? And I think that there's lots of people, I don't want to dwell on this too much right now, but there's a lot of people who do it. They try something, right? They say, okay, listen, I'm going to try selling on Amazon, or I'm going to try getting my buying Facebook ads or Google pay-per-click ads or whatever, right? I need to get the message out. They try it for 3 months, 2 months, whatever. It doesn't work. And they just go, I'm going to drop that whole channel, right? I'm not going to, that channel doesn't work. And the problem is that's not true, right? The way you use that channel, what you did on that channel didn't work. So I think being able to adjust on the fly and recognize the failures, right? The granular failures in an attempt is super important. But I want to go back real quick to your network idea, because I fully agree with you. And the way that you just explained network, in a lot of ways, I could term as validation, right? So if you were starting a restaurant, a taco shop, and there happened to be in LA one guy who was the taco shop reviewer, right? And everybody knew this guy, and everybody's like, if this guy likes these tacos, it's great, right? So you launch a taco shop, you get that guy on your side, and all of a sudden you're validated, you're real, right? And same thing with art, same thing with anything. And I think when you build that sort of validation, or you go out to build that foundation, I think you have to be, this goes back to some of the Napoleon Hill stuff, right? You have to be intent. You have to have you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what your goal is. You have to know. And the other thing this all sort of ties in is you have to do it one person at a time, right? Like when you were back selling herbal ecstasy, right? You went door to door, face to face, and you said, I'm going to go, and that's going to be a $10,000 sale here, or I'm out. So let me think about what that means, right? So how do we, right? If the network is super important, which I agree that it is, and I'm terming that as validation, what do we do, right? If we are an entrepreneur out there and we have product A or service A, and do we put in our minds, okay, I need in this category, if I sell real estate, I need the best probate attorney to validate that I'm good, right? Or how do you do that, right? Mechanically.
So the first thing I'll tell you is people that work for you are not part of your network. Remember that. You might be able to utilize them, but employees and contractors and people that you hire are not your network. So I've got a good friend. We're part of a men's group here in Los Angeles. It's an entertainment media marketing group called Metal International, fantastic group. And I've been a member from the early days. And the founder, this guy, Ken Rutowski, who's a good friend of mine, always says that your network is your net worth. And he's a master. Ken is like one of these guys who's like the Oprah Winfrey of connecting and network. And he says, don't network, connect is another one of his big lessons that he's taught us all. So the important thing, and I teach this also to my students in Amazon Mastery, is that you should not work in a fucking vacuum. The problem with us as entrepreneurs, and I put real estate agents into that category as well, because you are not guaranteed that you're going to eat tomorrow unless you sell some shit. So you are, for all effective purposes, an entrepreneur.
Of course.
And one of the things, and I always have great respect for real estate agents, because I see that. I see their hustle. I see the fact that they're going out, and if they don't sell that fucking house, they're not gonna be putting food on the table. So it's definitely a great profession, and a great profession of sales is that you cannot work in a vacuum, regardless of what thing that you're in. As entrepreneurs, we have a tendency to think that our problems are our problems, and that we're going to solve them by ourselves. And, men might be a little bit more stubborn, I think, than some women. And, we're like, yeah, we're going to solve it. We're going to get it by ourselves, and we don't need to stop and ask for directions. But the fact is that seeking mentorship, creating a mastermind. So like for my Amazon students, we have a mastermind, and we break them up into pods of about 55 to 100 students each. And they're at all different levels of selling on Amazon. So everybody helps everybody else out. I tell people the best way to learn something is to teach it. So if you're more experienced at selling on Amazon, you're going to spend some time helping the guy that's just coming onto the course. If you're just coming onto the course, you're going to learn. And then once you've learned a little bit, you're going to help the other guys, but you start building a network. So masterminds are a great way to do it. Taking courses that experts teach, also a great way to do it. Seeking mentorship, another fantastic way. I'm giving more real life, less general, actionable steps here. I know we were going a little bit broader on things.
That's great. I mean, digging in and getting deeper is great. So, I mean, I would agree with you, Shane. You can't work in a vacuum, right? Because the problem is when you're in a vacuum, right? I only have what's in my brain bouncing back and forth. The problem is, right? There's some data I may be missing, right? There's some certain steps that maybe you've gone through that I haven't gone through, right? And I may have, I believe, the right approach, but you may have tried that approach and it didn't work. So I think having a group of like-minded people, right? You don't need to be in the same industry, but like-minded, right? Going out, I want to build something and I want to try these platforms, is 100% necessary, right? The problem is, right? I think there's a problem, especially with high performance. Once you get to a point and you're really performing and you make some money, right? Then your ego and your ego says, I know everything, I know how to do it. You need to have people around you who've been there, tried that. And also, and even if they haven't, man, you need other smart people to go, hey, Shaahin, I'm thinking about doing this, right? What are your thoughts? Because you may have 10,000 data points that I don't have. So I look, I'm all in on your network idea. I think the challenge is when you talk about your high level. I'm in a men's group the same way, and we have a net worth requirement, and everybody wants to be in it, and we're like, hey, you haven't got there yet, So a lot of people want to be in my group, or they want to be in your group, but they haven't had enough success to actually validate themselves to spend time, right? The way we spend time. How does someone hear what we're talking about right now and go, yes, I need to be a part of an entrepreneur group that is with some actual real performers? Like, how do they go about even finding one? Because the group that I'm in, right, like people may know about it, right, but you may not have access to me or to you, right? So I mean, how let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of your network is your net worth. How do we go out and level up?
So there's a lot of groups out there that you can join. So you can start researching on the internet. Metal International is available. It's a men's group. It's open to women once a month as well. And the idea is men bringing each other up and help supporting each other. But there's also women's groups out there, which I think are really good. And I'm a big fan of that, because when you put the kind of the gender stuff aside, you have people helping each other bring each other up. So I think that's great. And I think it's great for women to have time with other strong women to help empower themselves. And same with men, to be around other men, to bond and to create and forge these kinds of relationships. There's also groups of mixed groups of people, and that's great too. So there's a couple ways to do it. And I've got an answer for your question too of why it's hard for some people to find those kinds of situations. The second thing that you could do is you can create your own mastermind. Invite people over. I know people who do dinners, and they only invite people they don't know to these dinners, and they'll invite 5 strangers, and everybody will cook together, or everybody will sit and have sushi or have coffee. So if you don't have a group of like that, you can do it, and you can do it without any ulterior motives. So it's an idea of, hey, just going to invite you guys over to dinner so people can get to know each other, and you can have just a rough format. And the ones that you like and the people who empower you, you can continue to build network with those people. You can also attend events and groups. Now that things are opening up after COVID, you can start attending stuff. But I think, the main reason why people aren't getting there is exactly what you said, is that we live in a short attention span type society right now, where people are chasing bullshit. People are chasing the shiny thing. You turn your phone on, and every 5 seconds is like someone being like, look at my Lamborghini, look at my jacuzzi and my and you're like, dude, you rented that fucking Lamborghini. Like if you I know a lot of guys that have houses like that. The last fucking thing they want is somebody knowing that they live in that house and have a yacht. All the guys I know that have yachts don't want anybody. They're not taking Instagram pictures on their yachts. So when see people,
the guys that I know that have airplanes are like, dude, don't tell those guys I have nobody. Right, they keep it all secret. That's funny.
You keep it all secret, yeah. And wealth. A friend of mine used to say, wealth is better made quietly. And I learned that the second and third time around. Believe me, I learned that after making hundreds of millions of dollars, losing hundreds of millions of dollars, and having to reinvent myself several times over. I learned that it's better that way. And really, the people that have the real wealth, you might not ever even hear about them. They're not out there shining the shiny things or chasing the shiny things because they're too busy making fucking money. And they're out there, they're networking with people, and you can find these people. You can find a mentor, you can find somebody, in real estate, there's tons of developers out there, and you will be shocked if you go up to them and you ask them, hey, can I take you for coffee? Can I buy you lunch? And just pick your brain. How many of them will say yes? And when you ask them how many people have offered to take you to lunch, how many people have asked for mentorship or guidance, they'll say, you're the first one. Because this is just not something that people do, mainly because they're afraid of rejection. They think that they have no value to bring, right? I always tell people, see what you can do for them. See what you can do for others first. When you're trying to enter into that kind of relationship, don't come at it with what can this person do for me? Right? What do you do? Oh, okay, yeah, I'm not interested in that, and you're gone. See what you can bring them. See what you can help them, and what they can do for you will come naturally.
And I think the other thing with that is, relationships. If somebody wants to build a relationship with you, they're like, this guy, man, this Shaahin guy's right, $1 billion. I want to get to know this guy. You and I don't have time for everybody who wants to buy us lunch to have lunch. Right. And I don't necessarily have 10 minutes for everybody. But if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, look, I just have 2 questions. I have 2 prepared questions. Here's what they are. Can I talk to you about these 2 things? Right. If you go, number one, if you go in for a small ask, you're more likely to get a positive result. And the other thing too is, people want to extract value from others instead of saying, look, what can I do for you? Is it, and look, we're all wired to say, hey, Shaahin, what can I do for you? You're like, I'm good, nothing. I'll tell you, I've learned when people say, hey, what can I do for you? Right. I try to come up with something, right? I try to say, okay, this is what you can do for me. Not that I really need that thing done, but I'm opening the door to some sort of a relationship. And I think most successful people are open to that. They're good with that.
Yeah, that's right. That's actually true. A better way, if you want to get somebody to become endeared to you or to endear yourself to someone, isn't to offer them something. Because what happens when we offer something to someone? Immediately, one of Professor Cialdini's principles of influence comes into play. The sixth principle of influence, which is reciprocity. We think, oh shit, this guy's giving me something. He's going to want something back. He's going to have expectations. All my guards go up, and boom. Instead, this is a great life hack. Ask them for something. You want to get to know somebody, call them and ask them for a favor. They might say no, they might say yes, they might say maybe. But if they do it, that builds, like you were just explaining, relationship far better than you giving them something. Because people can smell bullshit. People know that, like, hey, dude, you're not giving me the free toaster for no reason, right? You're giving me the free toaster because you want to sell me the fucking timeshare.
Right.
People know that.
Do you know that?
We're more sophisticated.
So do you know Ben Franklin? There's a famous story about Ben Franklin, right? Ben Franklin, there was one guy that they just did not get along, but Ben needed this guy's help later down the road. He knew that. And so Ben went, and apparently this guy, that's the old days. There was some sort of like a shovel. This guy loved his shovel. I don't know, it was something else, but he loved this shovel. And Ben Franklin went over and said, hey, can I borrow that shovel? And the guy had to, right? The guy ended up lending it to him. But in order for that person to get there, right, they have to manufacture in their heads, okay, I should lend my shovel to Ben Franklin, right? They have to come up with some reason to do it, and they do it. And in the story, Ben got the shovel. He never used a shovel. He left it in his living room, and then a week later, he gave it back to him. And all of a sudden, they actually had a relationship. They actually could work things out. So I agree with you, right? If you ask for something, right? This is why I think, if you want some of your time or my time, I think that if you come up and say, ask for something small, right? I have this question, Shaahin, right? I have this issue. Can you give me 5 minutes? We're all wired to go, okay, I can part with 5 minutes. I can help you answer this question, because no matter who you are, right? We all have an ego. We all want to help. We all want to show everybody how smart we are, right? So I think that's a way to do it. We'll see. The problem is, we have to start wrapping up, but the problem is, Shaahin, is, people, there's something about the wiring of people that I've had people like you come on this show, and they said, hey, everybody, if you want to come out and shadow me, spend a day at my office, you're more than welcome to do that, right? And there's hundreds of thousands of people that listen, and I'll come back 4 months later, I'll go, hey, Shaahin, how many people took you up on that? The answer is 0, right? So there's something that people are wired that, even though you invite them to take advantage of this opportunity, they don't. And I don't know what that is, right? This is why I end up talking a lot about mindset, because, is it something that we develop early, or is it something that we gain along the road, or what is it that people see an opportunity to connect with somebody successful like you, but they just don't take it? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we do. And, I'll step back one step to what you were saying earlier, and I'll address that point too as we close. Look, all the stuff that we're talking about is formulaic. There's a formula to persuasion. There's a formula to influence. There's a formula to sales. But there's no formula for being a real fucking person. There's no formula for authenticity. And at the end of the day, nothing sells better. I don't care what it is, pills, houses, cars, than just being an authentic person. You ever walk into I don't know, a store or dealership, and you see somebody who's just who they are, and there's no formula that they're doing. There's nothing that they could teach you about the things that they do and the way that they do it, but they're the best salesperson in their dealership. They're the number one selling whatever it is in what they're doing. Why? It's because of authenticity. We smell that. We sense that. To answer your latter question, if you're giving something to someone in that way, and it's a big promise, people get triggered by that reciprocity. So they're thinking, holy fuck, he's going to give me this big thing. He's going to want something. And even if he doesn't, I know that I have that trigger where I have to give him something back. Funny enough, I use this example. So after the herbal ecstasy company, I invented what was modern vaporization. I figured, hey, people have been smoking for thousands of years, digital vaporization, I should say. And you create smoke, tar, carbon monoxide, all these carcinogenic elements. There's got to be a better way to do it. Someone must have done this. No one's done it. I'm going to figure out a way to create healthier smoking. So I invented this device, and it started the size of a ketchup bottle, and it got smaller and smaller to the point where it got to a cigar. And then I sold that company. It went public. And it was the beginning of all the vaporizer kind of technology. And the interesting thing that I learned in those days was that we did this trade show. Okay, so I'll tell you the story real quick. So we did this trade fair, this trade show, and I thought, okay, this was before legalization of cannabis, and it was a cannabis trade show. So I was like, people who are doing cannabis, they're gonna love this thing, right? This is gonna be great. This is gonna be the be all end all. Like we're gonna make $1 million. And so we did the show, and people would come up to our booth and they'd be like, "What is that thing?" And I'd be like, "Dude, you can like put any herb in there and enjoy the benefits without smoke, tar, and carbon monoxide." They'd be gone before I'd finish my last sentence because they didn't care. They just wanted to get high. They just were like, they just wanted weed. Like that's all they cared about. And after a day, I was like, all right, this is a shit idea. And we were making crazy money in those days with these vapors. I was making them for $20, $40. We were the only ones. Imagine being the only vape in the market. We were making millions. And we were selling them for $400. And it was the size of a ketchup bottle. It was the only way that you could smoke without smoking. We didn't have the little, any of those little vapes that they have now. And so I sent one of my employees to the car and I said, look, just go get whatever I have. I had a little film production company. He's like, all you got is DVDs and books and stuff and T-shirts. I was like, just bring everything. And he was like, why? They're not related to the show. I was like, just bring everything. So he brought them up and we piled these boxes up. And as people started walking to our booth, I stopped telling them about what we do and stopped trying to sell them anything. And what I did is I told my staff and myself, I said, just give them free stuff. So one guy came by and I'm like, hey, you look like a medium. He said, what? I said, you look like a medium. He said, medium? I said, yeah. Here's a organic cotton T-shirt and it had like a film thing on it. And he was like, oh, dope. And he like comes up to the booth and he's like, well, what do you do? And so I start telling him, I'm like, we make these vaporizer things, but don't worry about that. That's not important. He's like, well, how much are they? And I was like, well, they're like $300-$400. He's like, could I use it for weed? We'd be like, we don't tell you can, but you can if you want to. He'd be like, all right, I'll take 2. We were like, wow. We sold out that day by doing just that. By just giving people things because they felt so obligated to come to get to know us. They felt so obligated just because we're giving them the stupid T-shirt or a DVD or a book in those days. They just felt so obligated that they were like, oh, and these were meaningful things. We weren't just giving them fucking candy or something, right? That's the stupidest thing, thinking just because you're going to give someone a cookie. Yeah, keychain or some shit. They're like, pen, right? It's like, but we were giving them something meaningful that nobody else was doing, and we sold out of these things that otherwise it would have been, a complete loss. So it's reciprocity. It's really powerful. Cialdini, have you read Influence? Cialdini, Professor Cialdini's book?
Long time ago.
Okay, yeah. So his more current one called PreSuasion, he talks about these areas of influence: social proof, likability, sincerity, scarcity. I'm sure I'm missing one or two, but when you implement these areas of influence, the sale becomes obvious. And then later on, the last one that he added to this, authority is one of them. It was reciprocity. And the reason why is because we're so hardwired to reply to reciprocity. So if you really wanted somebody to take you up on that, the better approach might have been, and not that you care because you're in the mentor position, if the right student will find you, but if you were to do it, to create hurdles for them to attain that, and then you'd probably have more people than you knew what to do with shadowing you.
Yeah, that's true. So we always ask for a book recommendation. You've talked a lot about books, and I think this is going to be a little bit of a weird setup or different setup than normal. When it comes to building a successful company and managing it successfully, do you think in the early days as you were building it, where should people focus, right? Should people focus on something like mindset, which is Napoleon Hill, or should people focus on persuasion, or should people focus on, this is just an opinion question, right? Do you think people should look at books on the mechanics, right? Like The Ultimate Salesman. Have you read that book?
Yeah. Augmentino.
Fantastic.
No,
No,
was it
no,
Augmentino?
no.
No, that's The Greatest Salesman.
That is great. So the Ultimate Sales, Chet Holmes. I could be getting into it's the greatest.
I think that's an older book as well. Yeah,
that's an older book as well.
Yeah.
But again, that's mechanics, right? The mechanics of how you build something. So for you in your early days, or maybe even after you had your first success, what do you think is the key to building company and really building a life that's valuable? Because you know what, we can go out and we can make $100 million and we can have a plane and yachts, right, and houses all over the world and still be unfulfilled and fundamentally be miserable. You know, I mean, I've experienced this in my life, right? Reaching a bunch of success and attaining everything that my mind could envision, and then I'm like, now what? I don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
So where do you think people should focus, right? Like on the mindset, the mechanics, or some of the more, something like persuasion or sales?
Mindset is super important. Without it, you don't get anywhere. The problem is a lot of the stuff has become highly marketed by a lot of the self-help gurus that are out now. So they want you to think that having passion and drive and mindset is what you need. No, that's not what you need. You need to do the fucking work. You need to roll up your sleeves and do the fucking work. That's what you do. That's what works. What works is doing the fucking work, getting out there. And, if you're a real estate agent, knocking on fucking doors and, meeting people in your neighborhood and building your network and calling the banks and doing whatever those things are that agents and brokers do, but it's just doing the work. There's nothing more effective than doing that. Now, outside of that, yes, you need to read books and watch videos and speak to people and learn and get a mentor, get into a mastermind group in what you do, and preferably have time to do things that you enjoy that are unrelated to the work that you do. That's a powerful thing as well. Creating these masterminds, creating this network, and especially if you're a family guy, you've got a family life, or a family girl, you've got all these things. There's a time where the brain needs to process. So it's really important where you're doing something at least at some time during the every day that is unrelated to anything having to do with what's bringing you money. Because what that does is it gives you bandwidth back. It lets the brain relax, and it lets all that amazing creativity come out about how you're going to make money. And making money is really an art, much more than a science. Making money is something that, like you say, yeah, you can make $100 million, you can have a yacht, and you can be unhappy. It's a lot easier to be happy when you have money, first and foremost.
That's true.
Believe me, I've been both places. And who said the person that said, having money isn't fun, just didn't know how to shop? Or my old mentor who used to say, the guy that said that money is the root of all evil didn't have any. Two really great quotes. It's just a lot easier to be happy when you're not poor and you're not broke. But look, at the end of the day, I think you do have to study people that have done what you want to do and to learn from them. And that's the amazing thing with books, right? A guy could spend his whole lifetime writing a book, and for $20, you can pick up this book and learn everything this person's done. And, I see you've got a lot of books behind you as well. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And I was just saying, and this guy, you could buy this book for $20. And this guy, like, I know people that have gone out and they do make $100 million a year. And these guys slave for years, for 2 and 3 years, trying to condense it, trying to create a narrative and write a book. And all of a sudden, I can get all that wisdom for $20, right? That's amazing. And I think just one of the things that I think is super important that you've touched on multiple times here, you were talking about network and mastermind groups. I think that there's a ton of value if I'm in a real estate, if I could get into a network like yours, a mastermind like yours that is focused on media, right? If I can cross-pollinate industries. And what you do and what this guy does, I think that's where the magic comes from, because there's your neural pathways. I think you need to expand your neural pathways instead of just thinking real estate, or media if you're talking about film and television or music. So I think there's a lot of magic in that. I think everybody should go, Shaahin, go buy your book, Billion. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, great. So for any listeners or viewers of Super Agents Live, I do have a 1-hour Amazon course. It's normally $200. I'll offer it to all your people for free in case any of you guys want to start Amazon businesses and learn how to create recurring revenue as an adjunct to your normal career. We talk about foundational thinking and foundational wealth, which is really what everybody should be doing. The 4-legged table, building cash flow positive real estate, having your career that's going to be bringing in the regular money, having some money in the markets, and then having an e-commerce business, preferably an Amazon business, which is very similar, adjacent to the real estate market in a crazy bubble right now. So they're toe to toe. And if people want to do that, you can go to FBAsellercourse.com or reach out to me on ShaahinShayan.com. I'm sure we'll include it in the show notes. That's for Amazon Mastery. We also have a podcast for anybody that's interested called Hack and Grow Rich. It's free on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere podcasts are found. Check out Hack and Grow Rich. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And for anybody interested in the book, it'll be released in the next week. It's called Billion, How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult. And you can get the first chapter, the audio chapter, for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere where podcasts are found.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I just want to say that I think I even looked at Amazon businesses because there is the people get into the real estate world because many times it's a second career, right? They go through, they're a teacher, they raise their kids, and they're like, oh, I have time to do this. And I think that the time freedom that people envision with real estate, you can also easily get on Amazon. I have a friend in that men's group. He nets about $1 million. And selling on Amazon, and I've dug into what are you doing? There's nothing magical there at all. Yeah. It is formulaic, and so anyhow, I everybody should go watch that. Hey, Shaahin, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Let's stay in touch.
Really appreciate the time. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, man. See you, bud.